You know, we usually think of our childhood as this separate chapter, right? Just a bunch of memories. But what if I told you those early years are actively shaping your physical health? Like right now, today. We're about to dive into a really shocking discovery, the ACEs study. And it totally redraws the map between our past and our present.
I mean, that's a wild question, isn't it? The idea that things that happened when you were a kid could predict your health 30 years down the line? It honestly sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. But here's the kicker. Researchers found out it's not fiction. It's a scientific fact.
Yep, that is the absolute heart of what we're talking about. A huge, totally groundbreaking study basically stumbled upon this exact link. And what they found, well, it's been revolutionizing how we think about health and human development ever since.
Okay, so let's get into the story of how this all came about. The funny thing is, researchers weren't even looking for this. It was a complete accident, a discovery that popped up during a totally different investigation.
So these researchers were trying to figure out the root causes of obesity, but they kept noticing this weird pattern in their data. Over and over again, it pointed back to people who'd had really difficult childhoods. And it wasn't just obesity. The exact same pattern started showing up for major adult illnesses. We're talking heart disease, diabetes, depression. It was this incredible link that, honestly, nobody saw coming. So this discovery really forced them to stop and try to categorize these powerful childhood events. They realized they needed a name for what they were seeing, a way to define this experience. And that's what they came up with, ACEs.
So what's an ACE? It stands for Adverse Childhood Experience. Basically, it's any potentially traumatic event that happens before you turn 18. And that phrase, potentially traumatic, is really the key here. We're talking about experiences that can just completely overwhelm a kid's ability to cope. It can actually change how they see the world and even themselves.
Now, to actually measure this stuff, the researchers pinpointed 10 very specific types of adversity. And these 10 experiences, they became the bedrock for their entire study and the scoring system that we're going to talk about. And here's what they are. The 10 experiences are grouped into 3 main buckets. First, you have abuse. That can be physical, emotional, or sexual. The second is neglect, which is about the absence of care, whether that's physical or emotional. And the third bucket is what they called household dysfunction. This is a big one. It includes things like witnessing violence, living with substance abuse or mental illness, your parents separating, or even having a relative who's been incarcerated. As you can imagine, every single one of these is a major source of stress for a kid who's still developing.
Okay, so the data showed a crystal clear link. But, just knowing there's a link isn't enough. The next question was the how. How does something that happened to you as a kid literally get under your skin and into your biology?
Right? It's a question that sounds almost impossible to answer. How can an event from the past physically change your future health? But it turns out there's a very real biological mechanism at play.
And the answer can be summed up in 2 words: toxic stress.
Okay, think about your body's stress response like a smoke detector. With healthy stress, like say you've got a big presentation at work, the alarm goes off, you deal with the situation, and then the alarm turns off. Everything goes back to normal. But for a child who's living through ACEs, that alarm system can get stuck in the on position. It's just blaring, constantly. And that constant flood of stress hormones wears down the body's systems over time, especially in a brain and body that's still growing. And that's what leads to the long-term damage.
So, okay, how do you even measure this kind of impact? Well, to put a number on it, the researchers came up with a really simple but really powerful tool.
It's called the ACE score, and it's super straightforward. You just get 1 point for each of those 10 ACEs we just listed that you experienced. So your score is a simple count, somewhere between 0 and 10.
And this is where it gets really crucial. The study found what scientists call a dose-response relationship. Basically, the dose of adversity matters. So the higher your ACE score, the higher the dose, the higher your risk for a whole host of health problems later on. It's a direct correlation.
Let's just take one example to show you how powerful this is. Let's talk about chronic depression. If your AC score is 0, you have a baseline risk, right? But if your score is 4 or more, your risk for chronic depression is over 400% higher. 400%! And you see these huge jumps across the board for things like heart disease and substance abuse too. This isn't some tiny statistical blip. It's a massive, massive effect.
Okay, I know what you might be thinking. After hearing all of that, it would be really easy to feel, well, kind of doomed, right? But I want to be super clear. That is the exact opposite of the message here.
This is not about destiny. It's about understanding.
Let me say it again. Your ACE score is not a life sentence. It doesn't seal your fate. A great way to think about it is like getting a cholesterol score. It doesn't mean you're going to have a heart attack. It just identifies a risk factor. It gives you a new way to understand your own story, your own health. It can provide context for things that maybe never quite made sense before.
And this quote right here just nails it perfectly. What is predictable is preventable. See, the whole point of knowing what's predictable isn't to scare us. It's to empower us. Because if you can predict it, you can take steps to prevent it.
And really, that's the ultimate takeaway from all of this. Just being aware is the first, most crucial step. Understanding how our past has impacted us is what gives us the power to actually change our future. It's what allows us to build resilience, to get the support we need, and to break these cycles for the next generation.
So look, the science is crystal clear. Our past definitely shapes us, but it absolutely does not have to define us. And now that you have this knowledge, the most important question isn't about the story that was written for you back then. It's about the one you're going to write next.